Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Ginnie Graham Show. I'm here with Tulsa Mayor Monroe Nichols. Thank you for joining me.
Glad to be here. Good to see you again.
Nice to see you too. It's been a little while. That's my fault. I was in my daughter's graduation month. You'd think it's a day, but no. Get ready next year. It's a whole year and month. So, um, I want to jump right in because there has been a lot happening, and I want to start with the community meetings that you launched, and specifically, I wanted to find out what your like top two or three takeaways were because those meetings seem to attract people who want specific things from the Parks Department, from the
Yeah.
utilities, but I'm sure people had big ideas. What are some of the things that you walked away learning from those?
I think the big thing, first of all, congratulations on getting a child off to college. And I shall learn from you as I go through this next year. I think the big thing that I learned in that process was just that, we still have a real challenge with people having access to all the resources at the city. And making those a little bit easier for people to get their hands on, to know the person to talk to, really actually does help us from a problem solving standpoint. Everything from like individual, like I got a problem with my water bill, all the way laddering up to, we got challenges around homelessness or public safety or whatever, and or give us some more insights on how the city's thinking about affordable housing and how I might be able to be engaged, whether I'm a church, developer, kind of a local kind of neighborhood based investor. So I think that's what it's really been about, is connecting those dots. Um, and what's really I think great about it is that usually the traditional kind of town hall model is that an elected official goes in front of a group, they got a bunch of questions. You try to address them as best you can, or you say, "Yeah, let me get back to you. I'll have somebody get back to you." The great thing about these community conversations is you got a question, the person to talk to is like across the room over there, and I think that's really been what I've learned is that the temperature that might be where that rises when people don't have access to things, they don't know where to go, that gets driven way up. What we've been able to do is bring that way down by just bringing City Hall to the community. And I think it's something that we've learned is very valuable and something that we'll want to figure out how we do on a regular basis at some level.
Were there any ideas that came out of that? Because you're talking about the daily city management, which is important, but I'm also kind of looking for ideas on what is Tulsa going to look 20 years from now? Like in the back of my mind, I don't want to be, we were chasing Oklahoma City for a while. I don't want to be chasing, Wichita. I also don't want to be Austin. That's a little too much. So, what are you hearing from people as far as are they bringing you ideas of, hey, this is where we kind of see Tulsa in the future, like those big
So,
ideas?
so, so those community conversations weren't necessarily structured in that way, but
Okay.
you do get some of that anyway, right? The community conversations were really structured so that folks can understand, how to solve problems at City Hall, so folks can get answers to things, and in some cases where people can share ideas, but as far as like capturing the ideas, I guess is not necessarily how those community conversations have been structured. I mean, that being said, I mean, not a day goes by where you don't hear from people, the direction they'd like to see the city go. And I think it's everything from, the kind of jobs that we might attract to addressing some of our kind of social issues that we have. And, homelessness always pops up, right? Like the many different ways in which we could address that problem. But I think on the other end of it, I think folks are really thinking about, how do we position this community not to be, the Austin or whatever, but like in Tulsa's own way, have that expansion of growth. But how do we begin to manage that right now? Like, how do we make sure we don't, get behind on infrastructure? So if we do see an influx of growth, like we don't pay the negative price for that. And it's actually influenced this budget actually, and how we are investing in infrastructure in certain parts of the city that we feel are like the next big areas from an economic development standpoint. A lot of that's been driven by input from citizens. Like, what I heard, and I think this has been true for a long time, and I think this is something that I imagine the city was investing in even before, but we've put a very specific focus on it. What I would hear all the time from developers, for example, is that you go to other parts of this region and they're willing to help you on some of the infrastructure pieces in the way that the city is not in Tulsa. some of that's not an apples to apples comparison, I will admit. But what we've tried to do now is think about, well, how do we start, investing in infrastructure in places that we know or feel very strongly that there's going to be growth. And so trying to really not get behind on that. So folks aren't waiting on the city to do our part to grow. So that we're kind of laying the foundation for that growth. And so that's been a big part of it, right? Like I think we have a long history, as you know, of being a place where innovators come to do things. Um, us trying to figure out what's the city's role in being a strong partner, not necessarily having to solve all the problems or have all the ideas, but how do we do our job really, really well? And our job is infrastructure. Our job is public safety. Our job is addressing some of the social challenges, because I think if we do that, Tulsa's going to go as far as further than any of us could imagine.
Speaking of, there have been announcement of two data centers that are interested in Tulsa. Have you gotten much feedback from that? Are the residents in North and East Tulsa excited about it, concerned about it? Because the data centers do bring, they're new, but
Yeah,
they do take resources and have like noise issues.
yeah,
What have you heard as far as that?
I can tell you. I know for us, we've had a lot of conversation about not basing our economic future on data centers, and a lot of that's because, in addition to the environmental issues, they typically are massive job creators. I think there's a space for some of that activity. Data centers, as a whole, I don't think will ever be a kind of critical piece of our economic development effort. I think that in some cases maybe a necessary evil. So, I think we're going to be probably pretty highly selective on data center type partners that we might have. Really having conversation about how do we mitigate some of the environmental challenges that they present, because we are relatively water rich here and we want to stay that way. And I think the big thing for me is making sure that economic opportunity for people who live here is our priority. And data centers don't always provide that. Again, it does not mean that zero is going to be the position that we take, but it will probably never be like, one of those things where it's a critical piece of what we're trying to attract, even if there's some ones and twos that might end up being here. Because again, my deal is about economic opportunity. Data centers don't always provide that kind of economic opportunity that we're focused on here at the city.
Right. I want to pivot to talking about 911 center, specifically the 911 data. That seems to be still an issue. Um, I mean, at this point, the city working group still isn't seen anything. And frankly, the Tulsa Police Department is now not releasing some 911 data to media when making requests on certain accidents, which is new. I mean, the department seems to be taking a broader and somewhat new interpretation of what 911 records are. What is the status of the releasing the 911 data, at least to the working group, so they can start looking into, any kind of systemic problems with
Yeah.
911? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but this does seem to be an issue that's not going away for you.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the reality is the law of numbers tells us there's always going to be some challenges in any system. And I don't think, being afraid to talk about those challenges is a position that we should have. I'm not even sure that's the space that we're in. I do think that there's not always a great understanding of the complexities of 911 and how the dispatch interacts with the police department, interacts with the fire department, interacts with IMSA, all those things. But I think that's been the reason why, since I got elected, we've really been focused on actually doing the things that are going to help us reform the system. I've met with Counselor Dexter Wright and Counselor Bellis, I believe, last week, along with police, fire, IMSA, and dispatch to really better understand. I mean, the request that has been made was made in 2023. I was not mayor then, so I was not necessarily well versed in exactly what that was. But my deal was like, hey, let's all get around the table and let's have a conversation about exactly what you're asking. What are the kind of the limitations of what can be provided, but more importantly, what are we going to do with the information we have it when it comes to us? And what I learned in that conversation was that the goal from the working group is that the data from 911 would go to the chief data officer to begin to sift through it. In which case, I guess it meant that I was releasing the data to myself in some ways. And so what we have done, we have the RFP for the third party coming in. We are working to figure out what are the things that can be released without any impact to privacy related issues for citizens based on any call that may have come in, and then evaluating what it is that needs to go, under some protected status to a third party or to the data folks here. And so they can produce things that allow us to see the trends that are going to get us into what kind of policy changes need to be made. So I think what the long and short of all of that is that we are working right now to make sure that we can get the data or at least answer the questions that the working group is looking to answer. Because there's not anybody really on the working group with the expertise to take all that information and make something out of it. And so figuring out how do we do that and make sure we can provide this. So what I've asked the counselors to do is to send me basically research questions. What do you want to know about the 911 system over a period of time, falling short of us, releasing any raw information that might, bring up any privacy concerns or anything like that. And I think that's a position that we want to take right now until we get the third party in, until we can figure out how do we, create some unique identifiers and those types of things. The potential impact to privacy related issues is something like I'm a little cagey about. But I think once we get on the other side of getting folks in who have the expertise, ability to take some of that raw information, the ability to make something out of it, and then to figure out how do we open source it, which is the goal. The goal is that maybe the 911 data that is useful can be more open source, and you don't have to do open records requests and those kind of things, and we can open source that information, which is going to be the goal and a priority for this administration to do so.
That's good to hear. I know that the media's position is, I know a lot of times records are deemed private that we would argue maybe shouldn't be. And so
Sure.
when we get denied 911 information that used to be open, that we used to get routinely, and now is not, that's a concern and a bridge we need to figure out how to get across,
Yeah.
because it seemed like the same problems the counselors are having, the media is now having. So
Yeah.
I'm just putting that on your radar.
Yeah, one of the things that I would say, I mean, like as you know, when it comes to these kind of things, I'm relatively an open book. Was the reason why I had the counselors and everybody else. It's like, hey, I did not have a pre-meeting for, hey, this is what we're going to say. It's just they're here. Let's talk about the complexities and figure out what would be like a stand in the gap solution. Because like I really do have a priority to kind of learn the complexities of the system myself, but B, make sure that we are prioritizing maintaining some privacy concerns. Also, I don't know what you guys used to get that you don't get anymore. Like I have no idea when you say, like, I don't know what that is. And so like I'd be uh more than happy to visit with anybody in the media to talk through, hey, this is what we used to get, we don't get this anymore. Or hey, this is what we asked for, and to talk about why that might be tough right now. And then what might be as we think about making things more open and transparent from an open sourcing type of a situation, what would be the kind of questions that we need to be most interested in, so we can balance that, making that information, the takeaway of that information, without having to worry about the privacy concerns as we work to not only reform the system, make sure response times are where they should be if they're out of whack, but also make sure that folks have access to information, because it also is not always easy to track down those records, right? Like it takes a lot in the way of man hours oftentimes. And so it actually behooves us in a lot of ways to open source a little bit of it. So that open records requests that can be very difficult, because we could be talking about up to 3 or 4 systems, to make that a little bit easier, even on our side, I think would be, it would help us just as much as it would help you all.
Okay, fair enough. We'll follow up with that. But I
Yeah,
wanted to wind up our short conversation here. There is a lot of action happening at the federal level, and I've always found that the average person, doesn't always make the link of the local conditions to what's happening at the federal level. So I just kind of want to throw out there and ask you, what are some things happening at the federal level that you're seeing have a direct impact right now in Tulsa? And the first thing that comes to my mind is the Section 8 vouchers going
yeah,
down, things like
yeah,
that. So what are some things that are sort of on your radar that you would ask Tulsans, hey, keep this on your radar to talk to your congressional
yeah.
representatives about?
There's a number of things. There's a flood mitigation grant that I think got caught up in the FEMA stuff. That was, I think, tens of millions of dollars that we'll no longer get here in Tulsa, just due to whatever changes are happening there. There's about 43 city employees covering a number of federal grants, not all of which are, super stable right now. Like we don't know, what the future is on a number of them, including the community violence intervention pilot that I launched early in my time here. About half the cities who got those resources don't have them anymore. And just so people understand the connection point, we had a shooting downtown a few weeks ago. The young people involved in that were folks who maybe if we, had started some of this work a long time ago, would have been folks we would have come in contact with in a different context. I mentioned that shooting was preventable because we knew the history of this young man and his family. We should have intervened, right? And so if you think about preventing those types of things in the future, that's what that grant is for. So we're going out to the community and working with those folks. So like there's a public safety component, and there's a number of public safety issues, even our rape kit testing work, all federal money. So there are things that people don't think are obvious to federal grants that are out there. So you got that part. And then we have two, and one major of our most recent economic development wins. It's on hold right now because of some of the instability that we see right now. So Norsun, I think, is paused right now. I still believe they'll come to Tulsa, but we should have been moving on that already. And I think they are a little slow just to see the impact of tariffs and all the kind of craziness going on in DC right now. Until that stabilizes, there's a number of economic development opportunities that are in flux, and it doesn't have to be that way. So it's hitting us, as you said, on the housing side, and we know what kind of housing problem we have. It's hitting us on the public safety side, and we know the challenges we have there, and it's hitting us on the economic development side. And so if you think about when I ran for mayor, I talked about homelessness, affordable housing, education, public safety, and economic opportunity. Right now, certainly some of the instability in DC is impacting every one of those priorities. We're still continuing our work, but not doing it under the best of circumstances, and we continue to work with our delegation on that. But until things stabilize, we're going to be reading the newspapers and looking at social media just like everybody else.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that summary. I'd like to give you the last word. Anything you want to say before we go?
Well, the next time I talk to you will be after the first Tulsa Race Massacre Day of Observance, and so we have a lot planned on June the 1st, which I'm really excited about. But I will say this is the last thing I'll say. Saturday, this is Memorial Day weekend, I had the opportunity to be with some Gold Star families, and the VFW, the Post 577 here in Tulsa, which is across the street from my house, is the fastest growing VFW in the country. And I thought about that given, all the folks who have served from this area in the military and being with those Gold Star families. It reminded me of the obligation we all have to really work together to solve problems. I think it's everything from the 911 system that you mentioned to affordable housing. What a great gift we've been given by those who have served. And our obligation in doing that is making sure we do everything we can to make this a great city. And so I want to encourage everybody who's watching and listening. Really, the future's in our hands, and I'm really excited to take that on with everybody in this city.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It is a great VFW hall too. Very historic, and
it
it's
is
cool. So,
it
thank
is.
you very much, and I will talk to you in a few weeks then.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.